I just want them back. I just want them to come back. And if...
This is Chris Watts. Just hours ago, his pregnant wife, Shanann Watts, and their 2 young daughters, Bella and Celeste, vanished.
I've texted. Her car's in the garage. Her shoes she wears every single day.
This is Nicole, friend of Shanann. Just a few hours earlier, she had driven Shanann home after the 2 returned from a business trip to Arizona. For almost 48 hours, Chris Watts maintained the same story, after murdering his pregnant wife and their 2 young daughters.
Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back.
Chris did everything he could to protect his story, but the investigation was closing in, and when there was nowhere left to run, on the afternoon of August 13, 2018, after Shanann missed an important doctor's appointment and stopped responding to calls and text messages, Nicole drove straight to the Watts family home. Concerned that something was terribly wrong, she contacted the Frederick Police Department and requested a welfare check. Within minutes, officers arrived at the scene, where Nicole began sharing everything she knew.
Hi.
You're Nicole?
Yes.
Okay, so what's going on?
So my friend, we were out of town for a business trip this weekend.
All right.
And I dropped her off at 2 o'clock this morning. She's 15 weeks pregnant. She wasn't feeling well, and she had a doctor's appointment this morning at 9, and I told her to let me know if she needed me to take her. She's got 2 little girls, and she was very distraught over the weekend, wasn't eating normally or drinking, and we kept trying to force it on her because she's pregnant. Her husband and her supposedly are separating, but she didn't know this. She thought they were just having issues. He disclosed that to me today.
Okay.
Because I called him, and I was like, have you talked or heard from Shanann since you left for work this morning? Because I can't get a hold of her. I've called, I've texted. Her car's in the garage. Her shoes she wears every single day are by the front door.
She only has 1 vehicle?
No, they only have the 1 vehicle and his work truck.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. There's not a...
Nicole told officers that she had already contacted Chris. He claimed he had no idea where Shanann was. With the house locked, investigators asked Chris to return home immediately.
Okay, get mad.
Scott, how you doing?
How's it going?
So this is the only vehicle she would have?
Only one that, yeah.
She would drive? Okay.
Shanann's car was still sitting inside the garage, which meant that if she had left the house, she had done so without her vehicle. But that was only the beginning. As officers began searching the house, they quickly realized that almost everything Shanann normally carried with her was still inside.
Her phone's here? Yeah. Her phone's here.
Does she work?
Yeah, she works from home.
Oh, from home?
She works This Is Her Lifeline.
This is her purse?
That's her purse. It's her medication. She takes these, her medication's still in here.
What about the local hospital?
We're gonna get a hold of them. We're working on all that.
By this point, nearly all of Shanann's personal belongings were still inside the home. According to Nicole, none of it made sense. Shanann would never leave without these items. With every new discovery, both Nicole and the officers became increasingly suspicious. Even so, there still wasn't enough evidence to determine what had actually happened. Investigators continued searching the children's bedrooms, the bathrooms, the closets, and every accessible part of the house. Even after searching every corner of the house, no signs of a struggle, no evidence of a forced entry, and nothing to suggest that someone had broken into the home. At that moment, investigators had almost no direction to follow. Shanann and the 2 girls had seemingly vanished. With no strong evidence inside the house, investigators turned their attention elsewhere. They asked Chris if any of the nearby homes had surveillance cameras. Chris told them that his neighbor Nate had security cameras facing the street. Hoping they had captured something important, the officers, along with Chris, walked over to Nate's house to review the surveillance footage.
Out there on the side, I just want to get everything back in. Be easier to lug everything out there, all the tools that I had to bring in.
As Nate began reviewing the surveillance footage, Chris's behavior started to change. the calm and cooperative husband officers had seen just moments earlier, was suddenly becoming visibly nervous. He repeatedly shifted his weight, folded his arms, rubbed his face, and struggled to stand still. Chris's unusual behavior didn't go unnoticed. Nate had been watching him just as closely as everyone else. As soon as Chris walked away, he quietly turned to one of the officers.
You just want to go talk to him? I'm going to get his info real quick. No.
Rock the back and forth, and if you look, he never loads his stuff in and out of the garage ever.
Right.
And it doesn't look like he came from right here. It looks like he came from down the street. And then the other thing that doesn't make sense is why would he pull past this part? You can see him pull past. And if he's loading his stuff, why isn't he walking back and forth? But I can't see what he's doing in the back of the truck because he pulled into the garage.
Although Chris's behavior had immediately raised suspicions, investigators still didn't have enough evidence to accuse him of anything. At that moment, Chris Watts wasn't a murder suspect. He was simply the husband of a missing woman. As officers left the Watts family home, the case was no longer being treated as a routine missing persons investigation. It had quickly become something far more suspicious. From that moment on, detectives began examining every part of Chris Watts' story. They reviewed phone records, verified timelines, interviewed neighbors, and close friends. And the more they investigated, the more inconsistencies they uncovered. Later that same evening, Chris stood outside his home and publicly pleaded for his family's safe return.
If somebody has her, just please bring her back. I need to see everybody. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring her back.
The following morning, the investigation took another major step forward. Agents from both the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and the FBI officially joined the case. With additional resources and experienced investigators now involved, Chris was questioned again.
What do you think happened?
At first, I really thought maybe she was just at somebody's house, just decompressing.
Exploring on scene?
Yeah. But after today, like with the onslaught of all the cars, all the police cars, all the news, all the canine units, it's making me lean the other direction about someone took her.
Okay.
But this is, if someone took her, it would have to have been someone she knew.
As investigators dug deeper, another significant lead began to emerge. They discovered that Chris had been involved in an affair with one of his co-workers, Nickel Kessinger.
If people knew that we were having marital issues, they're gonna look at me, especially with the way everything looks. And it honestly just makes me sick to my stomach because this is something that I would never do. Ever. I know, like, you have to look at every vantage point. This is something I would never do to my kids or my wife at all.
For the first time, detectives had a possible motive to investigate alongside the growing physical evidence, while detectives continued comparing every interview, every timeline, and every piece of surveillance footage with Chris's version of events. But despite the growing suspicion surrounding Chris, investigators still lacked the evidence they needed to make an arrest. By the end of August 14th, detectives were convinced that Chris wasn't telling the truth. The problem was, they still couldn't prove it. The following morning, investigators prepared for what they hoped would finally break the case: a formal interview, followed by a polygraph examination.
Where are they? Where did they go?
I don't know, sir. I really don't know.
Your wife's not the type of person to vanish.
I know she's not.
She had 10 things on her schedule that meant she was going to be there the next day, that day, the day after that, with friends, with a doctor. Okay? She didn't leave because she wanted to.
Okay.
So what happened?
I didn't do anything.
Throughout the examination, Chris repeatedly denied knowing where his family was. He insisted that he had nothing to do with Shanann's disappearance, and continued repeating the same version of events he had maintained since the investigation began. Rather than immediately accusing him of murder, investigators took a different approach. They carefully confronted Chris with the results, encouraging him to tell the truth, while explaining that this was his opportunity to be honest before the evidence spoke for itself.
This isn't follow you forever. I promise you, when you start talking to us, you will feel better. I know you already feel better about getting the Nikki off your chest.
Please don't like involve her in the news or anything like that. She can't.
For the first time since the investigation began, Chris's story was beginning to collapse. The pressure inside the interrogation room continued to build with every passing minute. Realizing that Chris still wasn't telling the complete truth, investigators tried one final strategy. They invited Chris's father into the interrogation room, hoping that speaking to someone he trusted would finally convince him to open up.
You don't want to protect her. I don't know what else to say. She hurt him? Yeah. And then I have to tell her. Well, no, I have to tell her. You're her. One, just one of them. His mother. Our children. I didn't hear anything. When I was downstairs, they came back up. They were gone. Talking about separation and everything, about she lost. I don't know, like, what else to say, like, I freaked out. Those are my kids. I heard like a little commotion upstairs, but I didn't think anything of it.
Although Chris had finally confessed, investigators still didn't believe they had the complete truth. His story simply didn't match the evidence. According to Chris, Shanann had killed their 2 daughters before he murdered her in a fit of rage. But detectives knew they couldn't rely on his words alone. Every part of his confession had to be verified. Using the information Chris provided during the interrogation, investigators immediately traveled to the Survey 319 oil site, the same remote location where Chris had worked on the morning of August 13th. Within hours, investigators made a horrifying discovery. Shanann Watts was found buried in a shallow grave, only a short distance away from the oil tanks. But the search wasn't over. As investigators continued examining the site, they made another devastating discovery. Inside 2 separate crude oil storage tanks were the bodies of Bella and Celeste. That discovery immediately destroyed Chris's original confession. The evidence no longer supported his claim that Shanann had murdered the children. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Chris finally admitted what had really happened.
Same blanket, same way? Okay.
She said, "No, Daddy." That's what she said.
He confessed that, during the early hours of August 13th, he murdered Shanann inside their home before loading her body, along with Bella and Celeste, into his work truck. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to multiple counts of first-degree murder, the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy, and tampering with deceased human bodies. Just days later, the court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, along with additional consecutive sentences for his remaining convictions.